And welcome to At Home YALC with Walker and Friends. Thanks for joining us. You can't tell I'm reading from script. These events have been coordinated by the Walker PR team and include authors from other publishers. So thank you for everyone who's made this happen. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a function by the Q&A button. Please ask questions at any point, but we'll be answering those questions at the end of the panel. We've got an hour in all, so we'll have at least sort of 15 minutes for questions, so please pop them in there. These events are going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube after the weekend, so if you're watching this later on, obviously you can't ask a question because we can't travel through time. But obviously, no, I've said that already. Don't forget, all those books are available to buy or pre-order. After the event, we'll send an email with links for you to do that. And if you're watching this afterwards, there'll be links in the description that show you all the places you can buy these brilliant books. So welcome to the Runaway YA panel. I'm going to be chairing. I'm Lisa Williamson. And I'm going to start by introducing our amazing 4 panellists. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to start, I'm going to introduce Chloe Hutch, who is a brand new voice in YA. Her debut, Too Dark to See. Did it come out last month with Firefly?
Yeah, July, 2nd of July, so beginning of this month.
So you can get it now, which is very exciting. And then we have Patrice Lawrence. Patrice is the author of several books for young adults, including the multi-award-winning Orange Boy, and her most recent novel, well, it's out next week with Hodder, is 8 Pieces of Silva. Then we have Amelia Mandeville. Amelia is a blogger along with her sister. She's one of the Mandeville sisters, and she's written 2 novels. Her second novel is The Missing Pieces of Me, and that's out August 20th.
Yeah, it's out in ebook currently as well. So.
Okay, brilliant. But physical copy out in August. And then we've got Non Pratt. Non is the author of lots of books for young adults, including Trouble, Unboxed, the novelisation of the Giant Days graphic novels, and her latest novel is out also next week, Every Little Piece of My Heart. So that's our novelist. Yeah, feel free to wave a book around if you have one to wave around. Marvellous. Okay, so the theme of our panel today is Runaway YA. But before, obviously, we've got books that aren't out yet. So probably for those who are watching today who don't know what your book's about, we should probably take a moment to just give them a little bit of an idea of what they can expect if they pick up a copy. So I'm going to go now backwards. So Non, would you like to tell us a little bit about Every Little Piece of My Heart?
This is Every Little Piece of My Heart. And it's it's an ensemble cast, and it sort of starts 5 months after a girl called Freya, who's like the most popular girl in school. She's left town. Nobody really knows why. It's not like sinister, but she's just gone. And her best friend receives a parcel from Freya, and she's really excited. It's the first communication she's had from her in 5 months. But inside there's a parcel for another person, and it's someone that Sophie, the best friend, has no idea who this person is whatsoever. She's like, she didn't even just go and find her at school, doesn't know who she is. And what happens is that after like every person is found and they open the parcel, there's like another layer with another name inside. So it's kind of just a little bit like progressing through the people who lived on kind of like the periphery of Freya's life and finding out kind of what Freya meant to them and what they meant to her, but also, as I said, like it's kind of like a group of people coming together who wouldn't otherwise know each other. So there's Sophie, the best friend. There's Wyn, who lives next door or lived next door to Freya, and then there's Lucas, who used to work with her, and then there's another guy, who I feel like I don't want to plot spoil too much. So there's somebody else. And then there's another person. You'll find out who they are if you read the book.
Cool. Thank you very much, Non. We're obviously going to come back to that. Amelia, can you tell us a little bit about Missing Pieces of You?
Yeah, I'm really usually bad at doing this because I babble for ages, so I try and do it as concise as I can. So it follows the story of Dustin and Willow. They're like childhood sweethearts. They're kind of the couple that everybody wants to be, and they have this gorgeous baby, Zara. have a lovely flat in Brighton. They're living the life. Then one day Dustin comes home and Willow has left. She's left with a letter, but not really saying why. She had left her baby alone. And yeah, it comes as a shock. And Dustin, he goes back home to his family, who he doesn't really have he hasn't spoken to them for like 3 years. Eventually you find out why. And he's got to assess his situation and try and work out what happened. And he starts realizing maybe he didn't truly know this girl that he had a baby with. Okay.
Cool. Patrice.
Exciting.
Hi, so brandish, sort of 8 pieces of sort of silver. And I was kind of interested in what happens when obsessional love meets obsessional falling in love. So Bex is 16 and her mum has just married Silva's dad. And they kind of know each other already, and they live in a sort of small flat in East London. So Silva's 18, she goes and takes her parents to the airport for their long-awaited sort of honeymoon, and doesn't come back. So Bex has to go into the forbidden territory of her sister's bedroom and find a box of 8 clues to work out where her sister's gone. So it's Runaway plus K-pop plus Black Panther plus a mackerel tabby called Azog the Defiler.
And Chloe, can you tell us a little bit about Too Dark to See?
Hi, sure. So Brandish 2 is mine. So Too Dark to See is it's been described as an intense book of love and survival. So it follows 15-year-old Kay. She loses her mother to cancer at the start of the book. And this throws her into a period of kind of intense self-destruction. So she's drinking too much, she alienates her friends, she is involved in unsafe sex. And at the same time, her father decides that they have to move to a small village at the edge of the moors in the north of England. And in this place, she just feels terribly alone, overwhelmed really by these feelings. And I think that's maybe why I've been put in the runaway category, because nobody does run away, but she kind of is desperate to try and escape these feelings of grief and depression and loss. And so she tries to find some sense of escape, and she finds herself on Blackmoss Mountain, which is where they've moved to. And she's open to a new world of kind of the natural world. She meets Sean, who is becomes somebody who's quite intense in her life and changes her life around, really. And she meets the wild ponies of the mountain too. And through those, she finds new hope, new love, and a new direction. And then there's a twist. And that's where
so obviously our theme today is running away, and like you kind of all touched on, it can take loads of different forms, and often it's not about the person who's run away, it's about the people that have been left behind. Patrice, what do you think is so sort of irresistible about this as a theme, and why do you think so many writers, particularly for young adults, are kind of like zone in on this as maybe a starting point for a story?
I think for me it's actually quite accidental, because I had my character Bex first.
And I love Bex.
Well, I kind of wanted to write about a queer black working class Londoner, and for me I wanted to write a story that wasn't about sexuality. It's not about a coming out story, because that's not my story to tell, and I really wanted her to be the hero. And she was such a strong character, so I thought, actually, what happens if she has to find someone, or she's put in a situation? So for me, it's actually one of the ways, I suppose, as a writer for young adults, that you can give your character real agency. They have to do something. They have to go on that quest. So for me, that was the attraction.
Okay, so did you go into it knowing it was going to be sort of this it was a mystery ultimately? Yeah,
because basically I'm really rubbish at planning, and I just think I need to learn. I think the way you can plan is through doing a mystery, so I kind of always knew that it was going to be these clues. What the hell they were changed all the time.
Oh, really?
So there were different things, and but I could use the clues to kind of like plot the story and the different elements of it and what it meant to her. So I think, I really wanted to write a proper mystery. I really wanted a sort of young woman to have to go and find someone across London, but also I love popular culture. So I really wanted her engagement with popular culture and using the things like K-pop and like, Marvel films and Lord of the Rings as ways that we could weave in clues as well.
Are they sort of tap into your own interests as well, or are these things that you've had to find out a hell of a lot more about in order to?
Oh my gosh, no! I'm popular culture geek. I mean, my daughter got into K-pop about when she was about 6 or 7 years ago. So we used to like watch the sort of videos a lot, and she told me a lot of the stories. I mean, I've loved the Lord of the Rings films and Hobbit and the Marvel films as well. So I think, you know, all my books are weaving a lot of popular culture, and also because I think people get really snobbish about popular culture. And I've been to schools and I've talked about K-pop, and sometimes it's boys who've come up and say, seriously, do you like K-pop? Like, yeah, you know, I can tell about, I actually prefer Korean indie, but I can talk with bands. So I think people get really snidey and snobbish about young people's interests and popular interests that are really unfair. So I think it's a way of letting young people feel seen as like, God, I so get this, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Amelia, there's a sort of a mystery at the heart of Missing Pieces of Me as well. Do you have a similar approach to Patrice in that, do you go in knowing what the outcome is, or was it a journey that you sort of discovered along with Dustin?
It was definitely a journey. I mean, I wanted the idea of clues, like there is clues in the story, but I didn't know exactly what they were going to be, and I didn't know exactly like what journey it was going to take him. I had a very loose idea, and it changed a lot of time throughout writing. I think I'm that sort of writer. I don't know, when I get carried away, then just something else happens and I'm like, oh, okay, this is where we're going. But it's also hard because obviously I think you guys will probably feel the same. When you're writing something like this, you've got to think like the plot holes, how it adds up. And it was a really hard book to write in comparison, because I had, you know, two, like one perspective was from the past and one was from the present, and I was like, well, I was overwhelmed, but hopefully it paid off. So
do you, just out of interest, are any of us plotters? Does anybody plot it all out?
No, better.
I do initially, but I don't think it ever follows the exact plot, because I feel like you can't really get into, well, for me, I can't really get into it until I start writing.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Lisa, I feel like you saw enough of me trying to plot this book that you know that this is the first book I tried to plot. And so this
how did that go for you, Non?
Really well. It was a rounding success. No. So
did you start with the Snowflake Method?
I did indeed.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Your attempt to plot a book and what happened?
So I basically, like, I've always been a character, like I've always been somebody who starts with a hook and then the characters, and I need to know like my beginning and the end. And I just sort of like, but this time around, and like what happens then is that like I do an awful lot of editing, and I feel like it's a really inefficient way of doing things. So I thought this time I would actually try and do some plotting. So I did some Googling, and I learned that there's a thing called the Snowflake Method, which I recommend if you want to have a look at it. I would type the Snowflake Method and actually have a look at the resources online, because my explanation is not going to be great, because I did it about 2 years ago. But the idea is that you start with like a single sentence of your book, like the hook essentially. So you water down the idea of your book into a single sentence, and then you kind of take each element of that sentence and build it up into like, and then you write a paragraph like of about 3 sentences, 4 sentences, and then you take each sentence of that paragraph and you write another paragraph about it. So the idea is that you're building a snowflake, like that. I can't draw a snowflake, but that's my turn trying to air draw a snowflake. And the one thing that I will say is that it did work in terms of, this is the first book that I've ever written where we didn't move around anything to do with the plot. So the plot has been the same from the start to finish.
Okay.
But
sounds hard.
It does sound hard. It sounds really.
Do you know what, the plotting was really easy, but then the writing was absolutely the worst. It was the worst, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. So I'm not sure I'll do that again.
You won't do it again.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm so interested in other writers' processes, but mainly because I'm waiting for somebody to come up with this idea that then is perfect and will work for me forever going forward. But I think it maybe doesn't exist. Chloe, how about you? Because Two Dark to See is your debut, so often with debuts, right, I find that maybe it's something that's been sort of gestating for a long time, but from you getting the initial germ of the idea to a final draft, what was that process? How long was it? And what changed?
Okay, so I originally started writing this in 2005. So some people may well have not been born then who are listening to this. So I had an idea for Kay. So my own mother died when I was a teenager. So I've wanted to write a story about the landscape of grief for a long time. But in 2005, I came up with Kay, and I really like Kay as a fictional character. But the problem with grief as a motivator, it's quite passive. And I found it really difficult to kind of get, you're talking about plot. So I had my character, but where did she go? So I put her in a drawer for a while. And then in 2013, I got her out again. And that was the year that I wrote the book. So I came up with Sean, I came up with the ponies, and I came up with, the kind of the plot. So yeah, that's not a great method if you're thinking about a long-term career. If you think about that, that's fine. But yeah, so my germ of the idea was kind of that emotional landscape. And then my character came out of that. And then from that, I kind of, I felt about for a plot and found my plot. And then it was, get it to publishers and try and get it published, really. And that was it. And here we are.
How have you found, because it's interesting, we're all at like different journeys in our sort of writing career. How has it been being a debut, particularly in 2020, when being a debut is very different to any other year? What surprised you about it? What have you found difficult, easy?
I don't have anything to compare it against. So this is my experience. I can't say, it was better than last time or worse than last time. I'm an autistic woman, so for me, having a book launch in lockdown was actually probably quite a freeing experience. So I had a book launch on Twitter. Now, I find Twitter heaven and hell equally. It's an amazing place, an amazing platform, but for someone who's got processing issues, it's kind of a bit like swings off in all different directions, and that can be quite tricky. But that was a really positive experience, and it opened my book up to people who would have never heard about it before, who've reviewed it for me, which has been really positive. So I've missed the bookshop. I've missed, going into the bookshop, the dream I had of, us all having a little glass of wine and going, hooray! There's an amazing independent bookshop in Portsmouth called Browser's Bookshop, which is where I would have really liked to have have our launch. So that didn't happen. But there's the future, and there's opportunities in the future to take the book there. So it's been a real mixed bag, and I've really enjoyed it. The independent publishers that I work for, Firefly, are amazing. They've really helped promote the books. I've been in the newspaper, I've been Welsh Libraries Author of the Month. So they have done so much to do it within these confines, of the space that we have. So, interesting. I don't know. What's it normally like? You tell me.
I don't know. I mean, these guys can tell you their experiences. Amelia, this is your second book, and I don't think you experienced the dreaded second book syndrome. But how did it compare going into writing a second novel?
I was scared because, every colour of you, it got a lovely response, especially for a debut author. And I was like, maybe I'm a one-trick pony. I know I'm a creative person, but I'm not an intelligent person. And I actually really remember this. Last time I did a panel, everyone was answering with really good answers. And I would just say stuff like, I wrote this book because I was sad. And I was literally like, oh my gosh, can I be an author? And it's still early days with the missing pieces of me, but the reviews I've got, it's making me think, maybe I'm not a one-trick pony. But it is scary, isn't it? It's nerve-wracking.
You've done it. You've done your second book. You're not a one-trick pony, are you? You can't be.
Yeah, my second book was a horrendous experience that took me twice as long, and was just, I was a mess. Anybody who puts out the second book, I'm just like, you did it, you got through it. Patrice and Non, how about you and your journeys? Are you finding now you've got more books under your belt that you're realising there are patterns, there are recurring themes, things that you keep coming back to? What are you discovering from being sort of experienced writers in terms of the number of books you've got out there? I'll go with Patrice first.
It's interesting sort of what Chloe was talking about grief, because that also pops up quite a lot. I think because my biological father died in my 20s in quite difficult circumstances. So I think even as I got older, I think a lot of that comes out in different books. So, just thinking Orange Boy Marlon's dad has died, and Indigo, her parents. And in Silva, it's sort of Silva's mum as well that she's still sort of processing. And I think for me also that's quite a good thing, because when I do school talks, I talk about that, and I talk about the circumstances of my dad dying, because he was alcoholic and he was homeless at the time, and about how difficult it is to talk about bereavement at the best of times, but under those circumstances, if you tell Annie you're dealing with your own emotions, but you don't want her to deal with how other people deal with it, so you hold it all inside you. Mm-hmm. So when I talk at schools about it, you know, I know that there are young people in the sort of, you know, listening, and often staff as well, who've experienced grief and are holding bits inside them. And I think the other thing is I think it's like also older sister syndrome. So there's always sibling relationships are at the heart of it. So it's in different, you know, in Indigo's like doesn't know her siblings, because she's they're all named after the colours of the rainbow. So there's sort of scarlet, coral, primrose, teal, bluebell, indigo, and violet. But she's not met any of them. So whereas in Silva, it's like two young women who aren't related by blood but are now sisters. So it's, you know, what it means to be a sister and have different types of families. And again, that's part of me always growing up in families. I've grown up in foster families and a step family, never been in a family where we're all the same colour. And lots of people are like that, but you never see that in the books I grew up with. So that, again, that all comes into my book. So yeah, siblings, also great big sisters, and grief as well.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of your writing is kind of reacting to the books that you didn't have? Did you think you're sort of, is that a big part of what you write?
I think it took me a long time to do that, because I was sort of, I grew up, every book I read had white characters in it, and I loved reading, but in a way that kind of reinforces the sense that I can't be in a book, because the more books you read of more white people, the more it's telling you you aren't part of the sort of, you can't be a character in a book. So I was in my 30s, I was sort of literally, I can remember 32, had a newborn baby, sitting watching telly in December in Hackney, and it's raining, and you sort of turn on the telly and it's like the BBC adaptation of Malorie Blackman's Pick Up Boy, and it's, oh my gosh, it's a black family, and it's not the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and it's not about racism, and literally it was like, you know, trying to be, I've written for a long time but couldn't find my voice, and it was like this door opened when I saw that family on TV. It's like, oh my gosh, I can write about me and my families. And I just thought, actually, the more that I do that, the more young people might not have to wait until they're 32 before they feel that they can write about people that look like them. So yeah, it took me a long time, but then I found my voice.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Patrice. Non, you are now on, you've got quite a few novels and novellas under your belt. Come on, tell us, what have you learned?
Nothing. I've learned that I've learned that I have no specific way of writing anything. And I've also learned I'm terrible at taking my own advice, because I'm always just like, just write what you love, write from the heart. And then I'm like, oh, actually, I'm a professional author contracted for a specific sort of book, and actually I have to write the specific sort of book. So like when I was coming up with the idea for what was going to be this book, I came up with so many ideas. All of them were slightly off-brand, but also none of them were quite working. Certainly not for this format, or like I hadn't quite got kind of like the idea. And I had a conversation with my publishers, and they were like, oh, you know, maybe you could try writing a romance. And I was like, maybe I could try writing a romance. And so what I wrote was a friendship novel, because that's all I write. It's like a romance. Like I just, like every book I've written, it's all about friends. Like it's never really about anything else. It is like trouble, like sort of, even though it's like a sort of initially like it's a, you know, boy girl setup, and you think that they might have a romance, it's a friendship novel. Like, and Remix was very much a friendship novel. And it's just like every subsequent novel, it's just been like all the different ways in which friends can support each other, love each other, hurt each other, betray each other. Like, I just think friendship is this huge topic, and I just can't ever stop talking about it, basically. So, like, in terms of recurring things, like, well, also what I've learned about myself is that I'm not a one-trick pony, but I'm a one fascination pony. Like, I can only write about something in which I'm very interested in, and I'm very interested in friendship. I'm also really, really interested in this idea that you actually put it on the back of the book, but it says like people are never just one thing, and that again is another recurring thing with everything in my book. Like, you think you're getting one kind of character, but what you're actually getting is somebody who has contains multitudes. We all contain multitudes. So, like, that's just the thing. And also, I did realise, like, I think I've only ever written one book where all the characters had married parents, like, and on their first marriages. Like, almost all of my books will feature like a prominent kind of either a step family or a single parent, because I was raised by my mum. And my parents got divorced when I was 5, and you know she didn't remarry, and it was just the two of us for a really, really long time for an only child. And I realised, like, thinking about like books that you read when you're younger, like obviously I like all of the books I read like had white characters, and like it never occurred to me that I couldn't be in a book. But I did think, like, why is every story about a divorced parent, like, why are they all sad? I didn't understand. I was like, I have this really positive relationship, like, with my parent, like, I don't have any hang-ups about the fact my parents are divorced. So, like, all of my books will feature perfectly content divorced parents. Yeah. And a cat. There's always a cat.
Oh, yeah.
Always a cat. What's the cat in the latest cat?
The latest cat is Sophie's cat, and he's called Woof.
Oh.
I asked Lisa and Holly Bourne to name the cat, and Holly's answer was Keanu. And I was like, I'm not calling the cat Keanu.
I'm just going to briefly ask, because I've got this written in big capital letters. I realised that it's the Runaway panel, but it could be called the Pieces panel, because 3 out of the 4 books have pieces.
I noticed that.
It's just like mysterious. And I know there's another, because I think Maggie Harcourt's has got pieces in it as well. It's the word of the moment. Titles. I'm always fascinated by titles because I find it an exhausting process.
Oh, look at that. She had it already.
Very good, Non. So I want to talk a little bit about, because I'm always fascinated by how people come up with titles, because I think in at least half my books it's been sort of a process that has caused me much pain. Chloe, was Too Dark to See, was that your idea, and how did you come up with that title? Because it's a great title.
Well, I was going to say, I shouldn't say I don't like my own title, should I? That's probably really what you don't say on a panel. But I hate making titles for books. It's just the most difficult thing in the world. I came up with about 150 different. This is the one it got. That's all I can tell you. Yeah, I just find it really difficult. Oh my God. You put so much work and effort into that book, and then you have to come up with a tiny, weeny little, collection of words to summarize it and bring it to the world, and it's really tricky. There's a lot of contrast in my book. There's a lot of, to do with kind of emotion, and that typical kind of symbolism of light and dark, to do with kind of, your sadness and your happiness and so on. So it comes from that, basically.
I like it. So I think you're being
Thank you so much.
Title there. Yeah. Patrice, how are you with titles?
Well, I've never been part of a trend before, but I think with the 4 YA books so far, it was sort of half and half. So Indigo Donut was mine, and 8 Pieces of Silva were mine. And I think I find we either have to like a title at the very beginning when I'm starting to write. It's like with Indigo Donut, it's like 2 words, and I have no idea what they were. So I did like a rough version of the Snowflake thing, like indigo, oh, rainbows, oh, what if? And 8 Pieces of Silva, I thought it's going to be clues, and sort of sister doesn't know her, so it's like 8 pieces of her. With Rose Interrupted, it was so painful. And my initial title was so bad, my editor just looked at me. So in the end, I left her to thrash it out with the publishers.
What that title was now.
Yeah, it's Rose Interrupted was great, and also there's a K-pop song called Girl Interrupted. But also it's got to be something, I think they said, that they can find when you Google it on Amazon. And I don't know, Orange Boy was originally Last Man Standing, and they came up with Orange Boy, which yeah, go for it. So got a bit of a colour theme, which has sort of helped me, I think, because else I've got no idea. It's like Chloe was saying, I have no idea.
I want to know your titles.
So yeah, Orange Boy, Indigo Donut, Rose Interrupted, 8 Pieces of Silva.
No, we want to know the ones you rejected.
Yeah, this is what.
No, I don't reject, because
anyone willing to share the ones that didn't make the cut?
Both my titles I haven't come up with them. I come up with really bad titles. Literally every colour of you I think was called Dog Life, which I don't know why. It was because there was a quote in there about lives of dogs, but it doesn't follow a dog. And then I think the missing pieces of me was like Goodbye Girl, but that sounds very similar to Gone Girl. So I think so it wasn't chosen.
It's always that thing, isn't it? When you come up with a really good title, like someone got there first, and you have to do.
Oh my! I didn't realise The Missing Pieces of Me is another book. I didn't realise until my book actually came out. Yeah, so I don't know if that will affect anything. So I was like, oh no, but I don't know. Does that happen?
They'll find you.
Yes, it does happen.
Yeah, there are often you find there are like 10.
This book, it's called Every Little Piece of My Heart. I wanted to call it something very similar to this. But then literally the day that Maggie announced her title, I just sent, we just agreed what the title for my book was going to be. And then I sent my editor an email and went, you can't call it that. That's like this, Maggie's got there first. So we changed it. And we kept Pieces, obviously. For some reason, Pieces is on trend.
Pieces is
all these pieces. Pieces.
But I hate titles. I've named a child. I've named cats. Nothing has ever been harder than naming the books ever. I hate it. I would just like it to be non-Pratt book 1, non-Pratt book 2. Fine.
But when you find the perfect title, though, when you know you've got it, it feels amazing. But
yeah.
Often, I've had uncertainty. It's taken me a while sometimes. I was just going to ask. It was touching on something that Chloe said about whether you were all emotional writers. Because I've heard some people who say, "Oh, I wrote the last chapter of my book and I was in tears," and I'm very unemotional when I write. I'm like a robot and just go. So do you sort of, how emotional are you? Do you get very caught up in your character's sort of emotional lives? I'm going to go to Patrice.
Patrice is muted.
Oh, hello. Okay, I will go to Non instead.
So this is the thing that I think is interesting. When I first started writing, like Trouble and Remix and Unboxed, like those three, I did really feel very emotionally invested in what happened to the characters, and I did. There are points in those books where where I did cry. But as I've gone on, I think because it's felt more like a job, I've become less kind of close emotionally to my characters. And also, I wonder sometimes if there's an element of age. Actually, as I age, I worry that I'm not as emotionally connected to the feelings that my teenage characters are going through.
Yeah.
And I have concerns about that, because obviously I feel like if I'm going to write meaningful, emotional books for my audience, I need to be feeling the same things that they're feeling. Otherwise, it's not true. But yeah, that's it. So that's my answer. Patrice.
Sorry, the doorbell kept going. Right, packages.
Books.
Yeah,
You're putting that on.
We'll go to Amelia. How about you? Are you somebody who gets really sort of in the world of your characters? Or
Yeah, I'm just an emotional person. I mean, this is probably why I write, because I probably wouldn't know what to do with myself. I really get invested. Like, I have like really sad music playing and I'm talking to myself. Like sometimes my boyfriend would be like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, no, I'm just getting in the zone. Because I think if I talk my characters out loud, like I get a different perspective of, would that sound like a real conversation? Honestly, people think I'm going through something when I'm writing. Probably am. But yeah, no, I'm just something else. I get really connected. And then I feel really sad. And then especially if like I've put my characters on like a difficult journey, I'm like, why did I do that? That's really unfair to them. I take it really personally. I like almost get annoyed at myself. So yeah, I'm really connected to writing.
That's so good. Honestly, I think that's so good. Like I'm jealous of you. Like,
I
wish I could be more.
I think that's a compliment, because you've got much more experience than me. So
we can team up.
Yeah, let's do that.
Skillshare.
Yeah.
Chloe, how about you? Because I know that you're a huge fan of nature, and obviously that feeds in a lot. Like, do you? I was going to ask about the idea of like sort of almost going on a pilgrimage to the. Do you have places in mind? Is it very much based in places you know?
Yeah, there's lots of places that I've used to create the landscape, but there's no one place that it's a fictional place. And so there's places in the north of England, in the Pennines, that I was thinking of, but also places in North Wales where I've grown up as an adult and I've lived as an adult. Just, vast lofty mountains, big open spaces, just a kind of like a metaphorical landscape, really. And going back to what people were saying about emotions, it's interesting because I feel when I read a book, I have to be invested emotionally. I need to be moved by those characters to enjoy the book. So for me, I want to use that emotion in my own work. But I don't think I'm emotional when I'm writing. I think it's a plot. I think you use your character and your character owns that feeling. But actually, I'm just plodding along, kind of trying to write it and get it down. So I don't think I cry over characters or feel sad about them particularly. Not that I think of. But yeah, so the landscape is it's a metaphorical landscape, but based on places that I've been. So I hope it works.
Yeah, definitely. Patrice, I know most of your novels you set in London, and I love sort of reading it because a lot of the time I was like, I know that bit. Do you ever sort of walk through because Bex is all over the place. Do you kind of walk her journey, or is it something that you
have to? I honestly haven't got very good, how can you put it? I haven't got very good visual imagination. So I have to see things quite often to write them, but also just being on buses, every bus is different, the way the windows open are different, there's different smells, there's different. And I think part of it was because unless you live in London, there's a very different idea of London that gets projected in different ways. So whether it's Richard Curtis films where there's virtually no black people in London whatsoever, and everybody has lots of white middle class dinner parties, and you might have a sort of random Chiwetel Ejiofor holding up something, but apart from that, there's no one. Or you get the London that I sort of believed in before I lived in London, that you hear on the news. So I thought Hackney was all tower blocks, not that it's got loads of parks and canals at the bottom. So for me, I thought it was really important to show that London is different, but also to show that London in every single way is diverse. So for me, it's important that Bex was working class as well, and that she lived in, I think something like Non was saying about, when you grow up in a different type of family, and quite often when you see those families, that they're really sad. It's like, no, she lives, she lives with her mum, she's got a great relationship with her mum. So for me, it's about those sort of diversity of relationships, and I suppose also in terms of, I've got this also thing about ethnicity where I got really fed up because I've always lived in mixed heritage families. My brothers are part Italian, my daughter's dad's white. But quite often I'd hear in sort of YA, mixed race families get exoticized a lot. So you'd get girls with long swishy hair and almond green eyes. And I thought, if you're mixed, it comes in all different ways. So that's why I've got, her dad, Silva's dad, is sort of, I think, part Ghanaian, part Vietnamese or something. Because actually people meet and have children. So for me, that's part, I have to walk around and think and see people, because I can't actually describe people unless I've seen someone who looks like them. So I was thinking, what do they look like? Oh my God, oh, I have to look up pictures of people because I'm so rubbish.
I think my visual imagination is getting worse, because sometimes I have to Google pictures of really simple things just to see what they look like.
Yes.
I'm just what's happened to me? We've got seven questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to go and look at the Q&A. I think I asked you to, and maybe I can't do all of this, but what's the best book you've read recently? Because I always like to pick up some book recommendations if I'm in a panel situation. So is there anything that you've read, maybe during lockdown, that you just loved it and want to share the love? And then we'll go and have a look. I'm going to look at these little Q&A now.
So lockdown has broken my reading, a lot, largely. But, and also a lot of the stuff, because I'm now an editor, so I'm also reading a lot of stuff that's getting published in 2021, so I can't talk about it. But I am currently reading Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir, which is the third in a quartet, the first one being Ember in the Ashes, and I just think it's completely brilliant. I really like slight fantasy YA. but it's kind of like Roman inspired, but like it's got like loads of different cultures in it. This is a really, really, really good, interesting, pacey fantasy YA. Like, I love it. Like, so yeah, there you go. That's what I'm reading. I think it's good.
Anyone else got something they want to shout about?
Yeah, I struggled, the same thing. I struggled to read, so I was reading sort of non-fiction, but then I just sort of really got into audiobooks. So I've just been listening to the first one of Lee Bardugo's Six of Crows, and now I've just started on sort of Crooked Kingdom, and I thought I have to stop listening to this because I've got to research my new book, else I'm going to go to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning because I need the sort of next chapter. But also the reason I had to run off now because like the postman was like hammering on the doorbell, and this has just arrived. So I've heard really good reports of that. So Cinderella by Kelly and Bayron, sort of I think a twist on a Cinderella. So people have read it, so it's really good. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. Chloe, anything?
Well, I'm afraid I've been reading middle grade, so I've not been reading young adult recently. So read Wild by Eloise Williams, who is the Welsh laureate, which is a really exciting book about witches. So challenges, people's conceptions, ideas about witches, which is really good. I read Bloom by Nicola Skinner, which was great fun too. And Stormhound by Claire Fayers, so really good, middle grade if you fancy. I've just found it easy to access, kind of fun and fast to read because it has been difficult in lockdown to concentrate really.
Amelia, anything that you've loved?
So my friend actually gave me, it's called You Don't Owe Me Pretty by Florence Given, I think it is, and I've just started reading that yesterday, and so far it's pretty enlightening. I think that's the only way I can describe it. Yeah, because I usually don't read those sort of books. I usually stick to fiction, but I've started like planning another book idea, and I feel like I get distracted if I start reading fictional books while I'm also trying to think of a new idea. So yeah, it's pretty good so far.
Cool.
Excellent. Sorry, what's it called?
You Don't Owe Me Pretty, I think. Wait, I'll go get it.
Is it Women Don't Owe You Pretty? I mean, just because I googled, I'm just like.
So.
By Florence Given.
Yes,
right?
That's it. What is it? Women Don't Owe You Pretty.
Women Don't Owe You Pretty.
I've heard about that.
It's one of my favourite quotes of all time about not owing prettiness just for occupying a space marks female.
Yeah.
I'm going to totally get it.
So far it's really good. I really do recommend it. I mean, I'm only like a couple of pages in, but that's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good.
Right, I'm going to
good title, that one.
We've got 10 now, so probably I won't ask all of you to answer every question. So I don't know what I want to do, whether someone just wants to put your hand up when you're in school, whether you want to take it. I don't know. But Lucy Proctor's asked, how long does it usually take you to write a book? Chloe, so how long did Too Dark to See take you?
Don't ask me. Don't ask me.
Okay, on average, how long does it take?
I'd say 18 months. So like I will be like 18 months from when I first sit down and start writing and mapping out my characters to if you intercepted an email that I was sending to my editor, I wouldn't feel horribly ashamed with what you saw. That's my assessment.
18 months. Patrice, how about you?
I think it just depends because I think for the first 3 books I was working full time and sort of had my daughter, and I think so Orange Boy is about 5 years, mainly because I was just doing other stuff and didn't expect it to be. And then children's publishing is quite brutal and quite often wants you to write a book a year. So if I actually need, keep a contract, then I think the same as Non is kind of like 18 months between thinking, oh, that's a great character, and then, oh my gosh, what should I do with them? Like, oh yeah, that's right then. So yeah, about that.
Amelia?
So I mean, I wrote Every Colour of You like before I got a deal and all that, and that was about 6 months. But obviously, if you count like between when I actually got the deal to when it got published, it was 2 years. So I think it is kind of 18 sort of months starting the plan to actually get into the end sort of bit.
Yeah. So about 18 months seems about right, but there's no right or wrong answer. Lucy also asks, how many times were you first rejected by agents before you eventually got your book published? Does anyone have some good rejection stories that they want to? Chloe?
I still don't have an agent, if anyone's out there and listening. But it took me 5 years to get my publishing deal with the independent publishers who published my book.
So perseverance is clearly the key. But I mean, all of us will probably have the books that didn't make it or stuff.
Yeah. I think I can't count. I think I got probably over 100 rejections. I mean, it was with different books, but yeah. I was quite young then, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm never going to get published. But you do really just have to try, and a lot of it is kind of. I feel like a lot of it is luck if you get the right person to read the right book.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean your writing's not good. Because I thought that. But it was literally just the right person to take a chance on me, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it only takes us that one yes, and it's often you read success stories in rejection, and that one yes, and they're just yeah,
definitely.
And I say that about Orange Boy as well. That even though I'd had an agent for quite a long time, that went to every single publisher, and nobody wanted it apart from one editor, which was a perfect editor. But I think you're exactly right. It's literally who sort of relates to your particular book when it lands on their desk. So I think there's a lot of luck in it as well.
Yeah, and it's worth waiting for that right person.
Yeah.
Once someone loves it. Amy asks, what do you want readers to take away from your books?
I could say what I want readers to take away from this book specifically. So like every little piece of my heart has 4 main characters, and you get like it's multiple narration, so you have like each of them gets a voice on the page, and I wanted to write an ensemble cast, so I could write an ensemble cast that wasn't just every character wasn't just white middle class, straight, cis, like able-bodied. So I'm really hoping that people who read this, I've got a character who's got lupus, I've got a character who's Chinese and gay, I've got working class characters. Like I just want people to take away the idea that you can have those people in stories, and they are like the story doesn't have to be about the specific issues. The people can just going about doing their business like people do in real life. And I really, really want people to go away and think, oh, I can write that. Like, that's what I want. I just want, but particularly I want people whose experiences are like that to go away and go, I can definitely, sometimes I just like them to go, well, I can do that better than this person can. I want people to write. That's what I want people to take away from my books. I want them to go away and write their own.
I like that.
And anybody else want to have anything to say on that?
I think for me, what I want is for it's quite a sensitive book. Both my books are, but I just think I want people to kind of think a bit differently to people who they're close to, and just the way like little actions can affect people. I've just realised every time I talk, I don't go on the screen. I don't know if there's something wrong with my mic. Sorry about that.
No, it's the same for everyone, I think.
Oh, hear me? Okay, that's all then. That's all good.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's what I want is for people to take away resilience and hope. Because I think that often we're afraid to talk about, like Patrice said, we're afraid to talk about grief. We're afraid to talk about, especially as teenagers, how that experience affects us, and we hold back. There's parts of us that find it difficult to share and find that place to share. But I think I wanted my book to reach out to those people, so that they could see that beyond that worst thing, there is hope, and there is love. Really, that's what I wanted.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. I'm just going to ask Amelia very quickly. What Peter has asked, what was the specific inspiration behind the missing pieces of me?
It's hard. So like every colour of you I wrote from like probably my experience. Like I was literally both characters, but I obviously separated myself. But this one's a lot more fictional, but there's definitely elements of my life that I've experienced. Without giving too much away, there's just certain things that the characters go through that I have, but obviously I don't have a baby and I haven't like ran away. So I don't understand to that extent, and that bit's fictional, which I think is actually quite helpful. Otherwise, it feels like I'm writing an autobiography if I don't add some fictional element. But I really just wanted to focus on like a single dad, because Dustin does become a single dad, and also about like this whole thing, why do people leave relationships? Why do they go away when you think everything's perfect? And trying to delve deep into that, because I think that is a thing. Like sometimes when I've known people and they've broken up, and I'm like, what? They were perfect. Like why? Why would they break up? And I just thought it'd be quite interesting to write from that sort of perspective. And yeah, I don't know, it just kind of came to me. It's really weird with my writing. It just does kind of come to me. I think if I'm thinking about something too long, I'm like, okay, I've got to write that down, or it's just going to go over in my head.
Yeah. I have to find it's the idea that just keeps niggling. It's maybe the one you've got to go after.
Yeah.
Jane has asked you all if you can share anything about what you're working on now, and also whether lockdown has been helpful or unhelpful for writing. Patrice, can you...
Initially, it was kind of unhelpful because my head was just candy floss, really. And I just said everything felt so incredibly overwhelming. So what I did was I read lots of non-fiction stuff, which may or may not go into sort of research. I read like about mudlarking in London and Georgian London and just stuff that was quite geeky, I think. And then over, I suppose, the last couple of sort of months, I mean, obviously, if I'm going to eat, I need to write. So I have to sort of make myself do it. And I've got also just got a really amazing writing group, and I'm writing my sort of next YA at the moment, which is on contract. And I just felt really, I just can't do this. It was just too much. So they've given me loads of writing prompts, and I found it really freeing. Just got a writing prompt and I just had free writing. I thought, oh my gosh, I never knew they were going to do that. So I'm trying to write something. I'm sort of interested in the idea about county lines, about young people who come out of cities and sell drugs into seaside towns. But I'm more interested in the experience of girls, because there's a lot about boys, but what happens about vulnerable girls? And I'm also, again, interested. I've got a character from 8 Pieces of Silva called Benny, who's like a dad who's been in prison, and he's got other children. So there's a boy called Spade who wakes up on Christmas morning to find out his dad he's never met is asleep on his sofa. So how do you build that relationship while they go on a road trip as well to find Spade's friend who's got caught up in county lines? So that's kind of as far as I've got, because I'm a bit like Non. I've got my beginning, got my end. Like, what on earth is happening in the middle?
Scary bit, the middle of the scary bit.
But also, what music? At the moment, we've got Queen, and I don't know. So let me do something else.
And what's your soundtrack? Does anyone else want to share what they're working on at the moment, if they've got anything?
I'm just working on lots of really, really awesome other books online.
We will be hearing more from Non at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I don't have another book deal, but I am working on another book, and well, I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed, we shall see. But it's I really want to write. It's very like early stages, but I really want to focus on emetophobia. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but I have it, and it rules my life. But it's a phobia of being sick, and it rules every single thing from like what you eat to places you'd go, to restaurants, and like drinking alcohol, like really small things. But I did a YouTube video on it, and the amount of people who said, I thought I was the only one, I didn't even know this was a thing. And I was like, I didn't know. I thought I was just, like weird. And until I realized it's a thing and loads of people suffer with it, and it has really bad effects. So yeah, it's still early stages, but I really want to write a book about that, because I don't think it's a thing, I guess, that people know. So yeah, I write from what I know, if you haven't noticed.
I am working on middle grade at the minute, so that's probably why I've been reading lots of middle grade. So I've written my first middle grade. It's kind of semi-fantasy, but again, it's got a really strong female character, and is kind of challenging assumptions about kind of femininity. So I've started the second one. So there's going to be 4 of those. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to find a publisher and maybe an agent. You never know.
Oh, everything sounds. I love hearing people writing about their future projects. It just makes me really excited. Right, I'm going to whiz through now, so I might be a bit like a 1 question per person. Because I want to get through everybody's. Do you guys ever run away, and like what Kirsty did there, to somewhere else to write? Do you have a set location or schedule? And does time run away with you when you write? So does anyone have somewhere? Yes, Non's got a hand in the air, like a good Thank you, Non.
I went away to an Argonne Foundation retreat to write a large chunk of Every Little Piece of My Heart. And it's because I went to the Clock House, which is in, I think, near Shrewsbury or Shropshire. It's really quiet, and you're allowed to sort of like not do anything else other than write, and it was really, really helpful. And time does run away with me. I frequently forget to eat because I'm an idiot.
Yeah, you know you're on a good thing, I think, when you can't eat. I'm going to just jump onto the next question because I would love to get all your answers for this if you've got them. So Tanya asks, she's a school librarian. It's her first time at YALC. Welcome, Tanya. The theme about Runaway, what song track would you choose for the teen protagonist of your book and why? Does anyone have one? This is a bit... Patrice! Does anyone have one? Patrice?
Yeah.
Patrice has got one, I know.
No, I'm trying to think because there's loads of sort of K-pop songs, but the ones I think, I like sort of BTS Singularity, great video. Even got some stickers to send out of the book of that. So I think, yeah, what she would have, what Bex would have, but it would be the sort of K-pop girl groups, sort of like Exit and stuff like that, because they're very energetic. So yeah.
Anybody else got a song that comes to mind when they think?
I keep thinking of Fight Song by Rachel Platten. Is it Rachel Platten? This is my fight song. But I don't know if it would fit in, but it's in my head all the time in a minute. That's what I would have.
Can anyone got just a quick bit of advice that they'll give to any new writers, particularly those interested in writing YA? Does anyone have like their go-to top bit of advice that they would share?
Write for love.
Yeah.
Don't write for money, write for love. That is how you will write the best book that you can. Write from the heart.
Never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Yeah, never give up and write from the heart, and hopefully the outcome will be, But it's a long old journey, but you might get there in the end, hopefully. Okay, so we sort of talked a bit about lockdown, draining creativity. Did anybody find the lockdown did not, was a boost, and or is it everyone found it? No, that's a ridiculous question. I feel like I've done a lot of writing, but produced nothing. So that's one. Abigail has asked, what inspired you to become an author? Is there sort of a specific moment where you were like, that's the job for me?
I think for me, I didn't really know until I just the only thing I found, I've been always writing. I remember when the Twilight books finished and I got so sad that I wrote myself another book. And I thought, at that point, I probably really want to, and I would just my mum used to own a shop, and when I would go there after school, I'd just sit on her iPad and be writing. I think I'm always I'm like, my head's in the cloud. I'm always thinking about stories. So I guess it makes sense that I write them down.
That's really cute. Anybody else got was there sort of a light bulb moment where you were like, this is for me?
No, it's sort of same as Amelia a little bit, but also because I've got younger brothers, so I used to write lots of stories for them. But I think I always liked writing, but just never thought I could be an author.
And then let me just, I've run over a little bit. I'll go to 5 past because we started at 5 past. Okay, what do you think about first when writing? Is it character comes first or is it plot comes first?
Character.
Or not so. Hook.
No, which is neither character nor plot.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. But mostly, I think I would probably say character. Plot is the I think of. Have we got anything else? Or another one about lockdown, making it harder or easier? We've all said harder. Harder to write. I think that's everything covered. I hope I've covered everybody's questions there. Thank you so much to everybody who sent in questions.
Thank you so much.
Our panelists, I've got a little script to read from again. So I've got to say that's all we have time for. So huge thank you to our panel, thank you to Chloe, thank you to Patrice, thank you to Non, thank you to Amelia. Again, at the end of this, you'll have an email which will tell you everywhere we can buy these brilliant books. If you're watching later on, you'll get in the description, there'll be a link to buy them. Obviously, you should buy everyone's books. At your chosen retailer. Do check out the Walker YA social media pages for more giveaways and opportunities over the weekend to get proofs, samplers. And everybody obviously hopes that YALC will happen in real life next year. Thank you so much for taking part. Non is doing this.
I just want to do a really quick plug for tomorrow at 7:30. I'm hosting the YALC quiz.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I'm also there's a donations page because I'm trying to raise money for Lupus UK. And my hope is that if every donation made, I will match that donation. So we'll double the money that goes to Lupus.
Amazing. And so people can find by your social media channels, they'll find out more.
Yes. I will put a tweet out.
Excellent. You should do the quiz. It's brilliant in real life, so I'm sure it'll be brilliant in its virtual form as well. Does anyone else have anything else they want to plug before we go? Anything else happening this weekend?
Thanks everybody for coming. That's all I want to say. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely doing it virtually, but I really enjoyed that. So thank you to my
Me
brilliant
too.
listeners. Have a lovely rest of At Home YALC.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.